hợp cùng kênh thông tin Bất Động Sản Hoa Kỳ, Realtech. Chương trình sẽ được trực tiếp đào tạo bởi ông Steve Brown, Chủ tịch Hiệp hội Bất Động Sản Hoa Kỳ, National Association Realtor NAR, cùng ông Hanoi Studio, chuyên viên marketing cao cấp hàng đầu của Arrogate Realty. Xin trân trọng chào mừng. Trước khi đến với phần nội dung chính của chương trình, xin kính mời ông Quốc Anh, Phó Tổng Giám đốc Công ty Cổ phần Đầu tư và Công nghệ Đại Việt, đơn vị chủ quản kênh bất động sản.com.vn, và ông Nguyễn Văn Đính, Phó Chủ tịch kiêm Tổng Thư ký Hội Môi giới Bất Động Sản Việt Nam lên có đôi lời chia sẻ. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông Nguyễn Quốc Anh.
Dear Mr. Steve, thưa chị Điền Nguyễn, đại diện cho Hiệp hội Bất Động Sản Hoa Kỳ, kính thưa toàn thể các vị khách quý đại biểu và kính thưa tất cả các nhà môi giới bất động sản hôm nay có mặt trong khán đài này. Nghề môi giới bất động sản ở Việt Nam thì chúng ta cũng đều thấy là nó đã được hình thành và phát triển khoảng hơn 20 năm kể từ khi luật đất đai năm 1993 ra đời. Đến nay thì cái lực lượng môi giới bất động sản Việt Nam chúng tôi thấy là đã rất là lớn mạnh và hùng hậu. Lực lượng theo thống kê của Hội Môi giới Bất Động sản Việt Nam thì chúng ta hiện nay có khoảng trên 100.000 môi giới bất động sản đang hoạt động tại Việt Nam, trong đó lớn nhất là thành phố Hồ Chí Minh là có trên 90.000 nhà môi giới bất động sản hoạt động, và thành phố Hà Nội là có gần 70.000 nhà môi giới bất động sản đang hoạt động, và các nhà môi giới bất động sản hoạt động ở những cái thị trường lớn như là Đà Nẵng, Nha Trang, đồng bằng sông Cửu Long. Như vậy chúng ta có thể thấy đó là một cái lực lượng phát triển rất mạnh sau hơn 20 năm. Tuy nhiên thì hoạt động môi giới bất động sản ở Việt Nam chúng ta thì mặc dù hiện nay các bạn đang làm rất tốt, chúng ta cũng đã thành công trong rất nhiều việc. Cái nhiệm vụ của chúng ta là kết nối giữa các dự án tới thị trường, tới những người phân phối, và đặc biệt trong những năm 2012 đến nay, qua một cái giai đoạn khủng hoảng thì môi giới bất động sản Việt Nam chúng ta đã lập một cái thành tích rất là kỳ diệu, đó là chúng ta đã giải phóng được một cái lượng lớn hàng tồn kho bất động sản trong những thời gian, đặc biệt là những năm 2013, 14. Đây là những cái thành tích mà xã hội, nhà nước và cộng đồng chúng ta ghi nhận. Chúng tôi vừa rồi ở tại Nha Trang cũng đã vinh danh cho trên 36 đơn vị sàn giao dịch bất động sản là những đơn vị có thành tích hoạt động rất tốt trong năm 2016, và 150 nhà môi giới chúng tôi công nhận là tiêu biểu, môi giới tiêu biểu Việt Nam. Chúng ta cũng đã hoạt động tốt như vậy. Tuy nhiên thì chúng tôi đánh giá là cái kỹ năng nghiệp vụ môi giới của chúng ta hiện nay vẫn còn hạn chế, chúng ta còn nhiều lỗ hổng, trình độ kỹ năng của chúng ta chưa bắt kịp với thế giới, nhất là trong cái khu vực ASEAN thôi, chúng ta cũng còn đang thua kém khá nhiều với các nước bạn như là Thái Lan, Singapore, Malaysia. Do vậy cái chiến lược trọng tâm, mục tiêu trọng tâm của môi giới bất động sản Việt Nam chúng tôi là cái hoạt động đẩy mạnh cái kỹ năng, cái kiến thức của người hành nghề môi giới bất động sản ở Việt Nam vươn lên đạt được với trình độ của trong khu vực và quốc tế. Mục tiêu này chúng tôi cũng đã thực hiện và triển khai trong từ đầu năm 2017 này. Các lớp đào tạo để tổ chức cho các nhà môi giới được cấp chứng chỉ hành nghề theo đúng quy định của pháp luật, các kỹ năng căn bản của nghề môi giới bất động sản Việt Nam. Thì ở đây tôi tin rằng là các bạn chắc còn khá nhiều người chưa được cấp cái chứng chỉ hành nghề đó, và chúng ta nếu chưa có cái đó thì chúng ta đang hoạt động là sai với quy định của pháp luật. Và trong thời gian tới đây, gần đây thì cái hoạt động thanh tra của nhà nước sẽ bắt đầu hoạt động mạnh về cái hoạt động thanh tra này. Cho nên tôi cũng mong rằng là các bạn chúng ta sẽ cố gắng hoàn thành đầu tiên là cái quy định của pháp luật, và văn phòng Hội Môi giới Bất Động sản Việt Nam ở 57 Láng Hạ, Ba Đình, Hà Nội sẽ luôn luôn tiếp nhận để hỗ trợ các bạn. Và Hội Môi giới Bất Động sản của chúng tôi thì sẽ hàng tháng kết hợp cùng với các sở xây dựng các địa phương để tổ chức các cái kỳ thi sát hạch cấp chứng chỉ hành nghề cho các bạn. Thì đó là cái quy định của pháp luật. Thế còn về kỹ năng mà chúng ta có thể hòa nhập được với thế giới thì chúng tôi phối hợp với các hiệp hội, các tổ chức của các nước phát triển, và đặc biệt hôm nay trong cái buổi họp này thì chúng tôi kết hợp với hiệp hội bất động sản Hoa Kỳ đưa đến những chuyên gia hàng đầu ở Hoa Kỳ, những chuyên gia có rất nhiều kinh nghiệm, và trong đó là có Phim nguyên là chủ tịch hiệp hội bất động sản Hoa Kỳ của khóa trước, với những kinh nghiệm quý báu của ông hôm nay đưa đến đây sẽ truyền đạt lại cho chúng ta những cái kỹ năng, những cái gọi là kiến thức căn bản. Và buổi hôm nay thì chúng ta sẽ được nghe những cái kiến thức căn bản nhất trong cái nghề môi giới bất động sản. Và tiếp theo đó thì chúng tôi với hiệp hội bất động sản Hoa Kỳ sẽ còn có những cái chương trình hợp tác dài hạn và bền vững để mà nâng cao những kiến thức của các bạn trở thành những cái chuyên gia cao cấp, những cái chuyên gia có thể là giới thiệu môi giới các bất động sản cho người nước ngoài, và thậm chí là mua bất động sản của Việt Nam chúng ta giới thiệu ra với quốc tế. Thì hôm nay trong cái buổi học Hội môi giới bất động sản Việt Nam chúng tôi tổ chức cái lớp học này và cũng giao cho đơn vị Bộ Bất Động Sản.com là một thành viên của môi giới bất động sản Việt Nam để tổ chức cái lớp học này. Cách đây 2 ngày thì lớp học ở thành phố Hồ Chí Minh cũng chỉ đưa là khán phòng cũng kín như thế này, và ở ngoài cũng dư cũng phải đến vài trăm người không vào được. Tức là con số chúng tôi thống kê lên gần 1.000 người môi giới bất động sản ở thành phố Hồ Chí Minh họ có nhu cầu đến để được nghe. Đó tôi cũng đánh giá đó là một cái nhu cầu, một cái sức hút và một cái đòi hỏi mà các nhà môi giới bất động sản ở Việt Nam chúng ta cũng đang muốn được hoàn thiện, được nâng cao để chúng ta làm việc tốt hơn. Một lần nữa thì tôi cũng gửi lời cảm ơn đến các chuyên gia và hiệp hội bất động sản Hoa Kỳ, cảm ơn đơn vị bất động sản.com đã tổ chức được cái buổi đào tạo này. Tôi cũng xin gửi lời chúc sức khỏe đến các vị đại biểu và các học viên hôm nay tham dự ở đây, các nhà môi giới bất động sản ngồi ở đây, và tôi cũng chúc cho các bạn hôm nay sẽ tiếp thu được nhiều những kiến thức quý báu từ các chuyên gia từ rất xa, từ bên Mỹ sang đây để truyền đạt cho chúng ta, và chúng ta sẽ có những thành công sau cái khóa học này để chúng ta có những tác điểm tốt hơn. Cuối cùng xin cảm ơn tất cả mọi người.
Xin cảm ơn phần phát biểu. Đơn vị tổ chức chương trình nên có lời phát biểu khai mạc, xin kính mời.
Lời đầu tiên là tôi xin được gửi lời cảm ơn đến toàn thể các anh chị em trong doanh bất động sản đã dành thời gian ngày hôm nay để đến tham dự chương trình đào tạo đặc biệt do bất động sản.com.vn tổ chức phối hợp cùng Hội môi giới Việt Nam và đặc biệt là Hội môi giới bất động sản Mỹ. Xin quý vị cùng chào một tay. Chương trình kính thưa là anh Huy Tính, kính thưa chị Liễu, ông Steve và ông Hart. Ngày hôm nay thì bất động sản.com.vn mong muốn tổ chức chương trình này và muốn đưa những kiến thức theo chuẩn chung của thế giới đến với anh chị để góp phần nâng cao hiệu quả hoạt động kinh doanh cũng như trong cách tiếp cận đối tác quốc tế. Vì sao? Vì hiện tại cái nhu cầu giao dịch bất động sản giữa Việt Nam và ngày càng trở nên sâu rộng hơn. Chính vì vậy, với sự hợp tác và có thể có cơ hội trao đổi với những chuyên gia đầu ngành trong thị trường bất động sản hàng đầu đó là Mỹ, là một cơ hội cực kỳ quý giá. Và như quý vị đã biết, từ đầu năm đến nay, bất động sản.com.vn đã tổ chức được 5 chương trình Expert Talk, kể cả chương trình đào tạo đặc biệt 2 ngày trước đây tại Hồ Chí Minh và ngày hôm nay là chương trình đào tạo đặc biệt tại Hà Nội. Thì đây là chương trình mà được bất động sản.com.vn đầu tư cái khoản kinh phí rất lớn để nhằm đảm bảo rằng là quý vị sẽ nhận được chất lượng chương trình tốt nhất. Thì một lần nữa thay mặt cho ban tổ chức thì xin cảm ơn quý vị và rất mong ngày hôm nay quý vị sẽ có một buổi đào tạo có sự hiệu quả, mang đến kiến thức, góp phần nâng cao hiệu quả công việc, cũng như là rất mong quý vị sẽ tiếp tục ủng hộ bất động sản.com.vn trong lần tổ chức Expert Talk tiếp theo. Do vậy xin cảm ơn quý vị.
Xin cảm ơn phần phát biểu hiểu của ông về. Xin kính mời diễn giả chính của chương trình, ông Steve Brown, Chủ tịch Hiệp hội Bất Động Sản Hoa Kỳ, nhiệm kỳ 2014, National Association of Realtors với sân khấu ạ. Welcome on the stage, Mr. Steve Brown, former President of National Association of Realtors, United States. Welcome on the stage. Xin kính mời.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Well, good morning. It's such a great honor to be here with you, our real estate colleagues, our professional real estate colleagues. You know, we are all in this industry together. And what you do here in Vietnam does in fact have an impact upon our real estate industry worldwide. No different than what I do in my company in Dayton, Ohio, in the United States. What we do as one industry has a ripple effect. And if we all act as professional realtors that we are and strive to be, we are going to make a difference, not only in our industry, but certainly in the lives of the people that we serve as they buy and sell their own real estate. I would like to sincerely thank so many people here today. Mr. Den, thank you so much for all of your kindness, your support, and for your invitation to come to be with all of you. And Mr. An and Ms. Zun with ButDongSong.com, thank you so much for your hospitality and your support. It's been just wonderful to be here. By the way, this is Mark and my first trip to Vietnam, and I pray that it will not be our last trip. You have a beautiful country, and it's genuinely a pleasure to be here. I would also like to introduce to you this morning the liaison from the president of the National Association of Realtors. And Lou, could you stand up? This is Lou Nguyen. She is actually, she is born in Vietnam. She's lived in the U.S. now for many years, and she is our liaison, your liaison to the National Association of Realtors. And honestly, without Lou's support and help over the past several months, we would not be here today. Thank you so much. I'd like to review the course outline with you today. What's that? Oh, okay. My prompter here. So I want to explain something to you. This has been a little bit of a challenging experience for me. When I grew up, my father was a businessman and a very successful businessman, but he was a laborer. He never wore a tie to the office when he went to work. And when we were raised, my brother and I were raised, he said, I want you to someday to be able to wear a tie to your job, because that shows success and that shows respect for the business and the industry that you're working in. Well, as you see today, I do not have a tie on, and I'm feeling a little guilty about that. But my father also taught me that he would have this expression. He said, Steve, sometimes in life and in business, you have to kind of be like the willow tree. You've got to bend with the circumstances. You've got to bend with the challenges that you're given and survive in those situations and overcome those challenges. Well, guess what? Mark and my luggage has never arrived in Vietnam. So what you are seeing today are clothes that are all made here in Vietnam that we purchased at the market in Ho Chi Minh City. And it was quite an experience for us because we were standing in the middle of this market trying clothes on. I mean, pants, shirts, everything. So it was a great experience, and I'm going back to the United States with a whole new wardrobe. So I want you to know that my lack of a tie is not for trying. We just did not have an opportunity to buy a tie. So I hope you will accept my humble forgiveness for not having a tie and at least in dress, showing you the respect that I want to show you from the National Association of Realtors. And by the way, later in the program, we are going to be talking about how you, as a business person, need to dress for success. And we'll be talking about that and what that means in our everyday business. So, let's go over the course outline. We are going to give you a global perspective of how real estate is conducted in all parts of the world. We've had the good fortune of visiting most of these areas, in fact, all of them and more. And one thing that is always profoundly impressive, and that is how wherever you're from, people have a desire to own their own property. Whether it's their home, whether it's their business, they have a sincere desire to call it their home and make it theirs. And so we are going to talk about how our professionals throughout the world conduct business. And it differs from place to place, depending upon customs, depending upon laws, depending upon training. So our first topic today, we're going to look at global real estate practices in North America, specifically the United States and Canada. We're going to look at how a business is practiced in Australia and in Europe. And then we're going to talk about the Vietnamese business model as it exists today. I will say one thing, all of these business models change over time. They're always evolving over time. So what might be true today here in Vietnam may not be how you're going to practice real estate 2 years from now. Or certainly, we have changed in the U.S. Over this period of time as well as to how we practice real estate. And I'll get into that especially in regards to agency and how our agency policies have evolved over time. Next, we're going to be talking about trends that are reshaping our industry in America and certainly around the world. And I think this in some ways is some of the most interesting information that I can convey to you, and how this information and these realities will have an impact on how each and every one of us does business over the next 20 to 30 years. Third, we're going to talk about our code of ethics, and specifically, we're going to talk about your code of ethics that the Vietnamese Association of Real Estate Professionals have put forward. And we're going to be talking about those in great detail in this morning. Then this afternoon, we're going to go into agency. We're going to talk about all kinds of different agencies that are offered. We're going to get a feeling for that in our first session this morning as to how different areas offer different agency programs. But then we're going to really dig in, if you will, get into the details of how agency affects how you do business and how you meet your clients and sell and buy properties. Then we're going to talk about, Mark is going to talk about real estate branding and marketing. Mark is a real estate marketing director. He is the director of our company. We have a company in Dayton, Ohio, 6 offices, about 360 real estate agents. We cover our entire region in that part of Ohio. And Mark has done this for the past 25 years. So he'll be sharing some of the insights that he might have as to how you can better market and brand yourself as you grow your business in the real estate industry. And then we're going to talk about professional associations. I thought this morning's remarks from Mr. Din were very, very profound. the importance of an active, vital, in touch real estate association. That's very important to our industry and our sustainability as an industry. So we will be talking about that this afternoon. And finally, leadership. Your own personal responsibility for your leadership role in this industry, in your communities, and of course in your country. So that's kind of the overall outline as to what we're going to be talking about today. So why don't we begin? Let's see. I'm pushing the button. There we go. Okay, we're good. You may have to help me on this stuff. Great, thank you. Okay, so let's start, as I mentioned, with North America. That specifically would be the United States and Canada. In our markets in the United States and Canada, we offer a full range of agency options. We offer the buyer representation, seller representation, and dual agency. Dual agency, dual representation is when obviously you represent the seller and the buyer in the same transaction. Secondly, property listings. Collectively shared with an offer of compensation with all of our members through the multiple listing service. I want to just take a moment to explain what MLS, the multiple listing service, is and the difference it has made in the U.S. As you know, the U.S. is certainly, one would say, prides itself on being a competitive market, very independent, driven by market trends and such. But our forefathers in this industry decided many, many decades ago that in order to most effectively serve our real estate clients, they wanted to create a database of all the listings that would be available at any given time. And so they created this multiple listing service. What's interesting is that what that means really is that every single real estate agent, myself included, will send our listings to this database, this multiple listing service database, and offer any real estate agent in our market compensation, offer to pay them if they bring a buyer onto that house. Now, you might say, well, my goodness, you're giving up some of your commission by offering other agents to sell the property. And that's true. The average commission rate in the United States and Canada right now is somewhere between 5 and 6% of the selling price. You will never hear anyone from the United States talk about a set commission fee because we have government regulations that prevent us from setting the fee across the board. On the contrary, every real estate agent, every real estate company can set their own fee. But on the average in our marketplace, you will see commissions that are paid out are between 5 and 6% of the selling price. So when we send a listing to the multiple listing service, that listing, let's say, is going to offer you as a selling agent a 3% cooperative fee. In other words, you're going to earn 3% commission on the sale of that property. Well, so in our market today, across the country, more than 70% of all listings in the U.S. are sold on a cooperative basis. That is, someone other than the listing agent is selling the property. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? First of all, what that means for the consumer is the consumer knows, the seller knows their listing is being exposed to everyone in the marketplace. And what does that mean to the seller? Well, ultimately that means to the seller that they are going to have an opportunity to have as many buyers look at that house as possible. So the seller wins in a cooperative system like this. There's no question about that. But the win for the realtor in the U.S. is this. When I have, if I could only sell my own listings, then my own sales volume is going to be restricted to the number of properties I personally have listed. Well, I have currently, I think on the books, something around 22 listings. Now, I am an owner of a company, a co-owner of a company, but I am also and always have been a listing and selling agent, always. And so I compete in the marketplace just like all of my agents do. But if my sales volume were dependent only on my listings, then my income stream is going to be rather limited just to those listings that I hold. Whereas through the multiple listing system, what I'm able to do is sell any one of the 15,000 listings in our marketplace, because we all share our inventory. So it's a model that is unique to real estate. It's actually a business model that's unique to the United States and Canada. But it's a model that has, we feel, increased the income potential for any real estate agent, number one. Number two, it has increased the buyer's ability to see all the listings that are in the market at any one time, with the convenience of working with just one agent at any one given time, rather than having to call the listing agent for this property and the listing agent for that property. So in the United States and Canada, this has been a very successful business model. As I said, it's unique. It's really a model built, if you will, on socialistic principles. We share all of our inventory with everyone in the marketplace. And it's worked, and it's been profitable. So, buyer-seller dual agency compensation. Yes, we will pay any of those agents how they are working with their buyer or client. Compensation is paid to them. Normally, compensation is split. So if, just for simplicity's sake, if you have a 6% commission, 3% is going to go to the selling agent, 3% is going to go to the listing agent. Very simple. Property financing. The majority of homes in the U.S. are bank financed. We can put financing in the U.S., we can put down as little, and in Canada, as little as 3.5% of the selling price as a down payment, and we can finance the rest. The average financial percentage in the U.S. tends to be closer to about 82%. In other words, people are putting down approximately 20% of the selling price of the property. Our association. Licensing. In the U.S., every state, so we have 50 states in the United States. In Canada, they have how many provinces? 15 provinces. Each of those provinces and each of those states determine how you are licensed. They will set their own requirements. And as was mentioned earlier today, that is strictly enforced and monitored by each state government, by each province, without question. So if you're out trying to sell real estate without a real estate license issued from the state of the province, you're going to be in big trouble. You could, in fact, go to jail for practicing real estate without a license. So that's the first step, and the first requirement But in addition to that, you have the opportunity, just like you do here in Vietnam, to belong to an association. In the U.S., that association that dominates our market is called the National Association of Realtors. The National Association of Realtors is the largest trade organization in the entire world. Currently, we have about more than 1.2 million members. But what's more impressive, I think, is that in the United States, we have roughly about 2.1 million licensees. Half of those licensees are members of the National Association of Realtors. But here's the important point. Of all the real estate transactions in the U.S., 90% of all real estate transactions are conducted by those who are members of the National Association of Realtors. 90% of all real estate transactions are conducted by a realtor. Why is that? Well, I think there are several reasons. One, we have been in existence as an association since 1913. That's more than 100 years. We've had lots of time to build our branding in the market, that we are different from every other real estate licensee that might be out there. The reason why, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the Code of Ethics, but the reason why the National Association of Realtors really started was because a group of men wanted to separate their business practices from all the other real estate people in the market who were not being honest, who were not being trustworthy in the sale of property. So that's why the National Association of Realtors started. And over the years, we build on that you're working with a realtor who is committed to a code of ethics. That's what it's about. And by the way, the Canada Association of Realtors and the U.S. Association of Realtors started out as one organization. But over the years, they split into two and individually serve their own countries, but their principles and practices are essentially identical. Finally, Code of Ethics. Well, we just talked about it. The National Association of Realtors has a very in-depth Code of Ethics. We'll talk about that a little bit in detail, but what I've got to tell you this, and is really impressive to me, is VAR's Code of Ethics, the Vietnamese Association of Real Estate Professionals Code of Ethics. You have a terrific Code of Ethics that really divides your responsibility between your personal obligations and your professional obligations. And we are going to, as they say, drill down. We're going to look at that very closely later on today. So, as in every case, every business model has its strengths and it has its weaknesses. So what are the weaknesses of our system? I need to change it. Yeah, good. So, every state does their own licensing. There is no minimum licensing law standard in the U.S. So you may have a state like Ohio who puts forward a lot of education requirements before someone can hold a real estate license. And then you could have another state who says, we don't care about any education. If you want to sell real estate, sign here and pay $50. So there's an unevenness in entry-level requirements in the U.S. and in Canada. And in the Code of Ethics, what makes the Code of Ethics work so often is that if you see one of your colleagues do something that's wrong, it's up to you to report them to the system. And many of our agents, many of our members will not take the time to report. This is beeping here. I'm going to try to soften that a little bit. Okay, let's see if that helps. That's not beeping so much, is it? So that's a weakness in our system, actually. And it's something that we have to constantly remind our members that they have an ethical responsibility to report when they see things are not good. Moving on to the next one. I need you to advance this line. This is not working at all. The Australian business model. So, have any of you been to Australia? If you would, raise your hand. Okay. So, here we got some. So, Australia is a very interesting market. They have a very close association with the National Association of Realtors. I enjoy going to Australia. It's a great, exciting market. They practice agency, buyer, seller, and dual agency is practiced. Property listings. This is what is, thank you. This is what is really kind of different about Australia. And that is many of their properties, in fact, most of their homes, are not sold in the normal process. Put a sign in the ground, have people look at it, and then they buy the property. On the contrary, many of their properties in Australia are sold on an auction basis. So you, as a listing agent, would go out, you list the house, and then you put it on an auction site that you give everyone notice that there is a minimum amount required. They may or may not disclose the minimum bid on the property, and then they open it up for viewing for a specific period of time. And then at the end of that time, they conduct a live auction. And I've been to these live auctions. They're interesting. They're really quite exciting. And we'll talk about some of the drawbacks of that. But many homes there are sold, and you will have multiple bidders on the house, not only in the one auction house or the one auction event, but also online bidding on properties. They have a very active inventory and a very active selling market. They practice buyer, seller, and dual representation, and they compensate for all three, even on an auction. So it's not at all unusual to go to the auction and see the seller of the home standing there with his or her agent and discussing how the bids are looking and how they're coming in and so forth. What is also unique about the Australian model is that their commission rate tends to be a little bit less, certainly, than what we find in the United States and Canada. And the reason that is that in Australia, they require the seller to pay up front all their marketing fees. So if they have a professional photographer, if they want to do a billboard, if they want to do newspaper advertising, if they want to have a professional photographer, all of that is paid for by the seller. The agent does not pay anything towards marketing of the property. Property financing. Most homes are financed through bank loans. But I'll tell you a problem in just a minute with that. Licensing. So there are several states in Australia. Each individual state, similar to the US and Canada, sets their own licensing law standards. The association, there is one association in every state, and then there's a body that coordinates all the states under one body. And finally, a code of ethics. Adherence to the code of ethics is enforced by the state associations. Again, they're very big on code of ethics. By the way, just for your information, the National Association of Realtors has currently close to 90 different bilateral agreements with countries around the world. Vietnam is one of them. But one of the main requirements to be in an associate relationship with the National Association of Realtors is that you have an active code of ethics, that you have one and that's enforceable and that's acknowledged by all of your members. So we're still not working. There we go. I think I did that. So what's the weakness with this model? Well, I mentioned the auction model of selling properties. Well, what happens when you go to an auction? People get really excited and think, oh, it's just a few $1,000s more. Oh, I got to get this. And they get excited and carried away. Well, when you sell real estate, you've got to base the value of that house in some form or fashion that has a rational basis. That is, that you can demonstrate the value of the property. When you get into an auction situation, very frequently, the data comparable sales is not acknowledged, and oftentimes people will come in and possibly overpay for a property. Now, I mentioned to you earlier about financing. When they go to get a loan at the bank is not caught up in this auction environment. They are looking at the solid data of the market and the comparable homes that have sold in this neighborhood. They're not excited. They're looking, is this a reasonable price for this house? And in fact, when they feel as though the house has been over-purchased, the buyer normally has to make up the difference in cash between what the house appraised for and their loan. So that's why, by the way, the realtor representing the buyer is critical in that process, because the buyer's realtor should be standing right beside that buyer as he or she is bidding on the house and saying, you know, this is just a little bit too much. There's no supported data for this price. I would suggest you stop and not go any further in pricing. Again, every state in Australia sets their own standard of licensing, so there's no minimum licensing standard. And again, it's up to each realtor to report any ethical or code violations that they see. And what we have found across the market are people are reluctant to do that. The European business model, very different from what we just talked about. Really, the European business model is based upon a very, very old legal tradition. It's a Roman law tradition. And it's built on the basis of a Latin phrase known as caveat emptor. Caveat emptor, which simply means buyer beware. In the European model, very rarely is a buyer ever represented by an agent. Agency. Seller agency is primary. The buyer remains unrepresented in those transactions. My cousin, my aunt and uncle live in England and have for the past 50-some years. And when my cousin recently purchased a property, she went to the seller's agent and asked questions. The seller's agent was not terribly helpful, but that's not his role. He's representing the seller. He was not representing her in the transaction. And so it's a system that's based upon the fact that you as a buyer need to be prepared yourself to negotiate a price without any help or assistance from a real estate professional, unless you purchase or buy that kind of a guidance and advice from someone that you want to work with as you would a financial consultant. Property listings. Therefore, every listing in England and basically throughout Europe is listed only by a listing agent. So if you were in Denmark and you wanted to buy a home, you would have to contact this real estate agent for that house, another real estate agent for this house, and so on. It's not one agent that you can work with in your purchasing. Commission is only paid to the seller. The seller retains the seller's agent. That's it. The seller of the property does not pay any commission to any other real estate professional in the transaction. Property financing. Properties are commonly financed through bank loans. Now, one thing that's very good about the European model is they very much record the selling prices of the properties. So they have built over the decades a very strong database of comparable sales in their market. So if my cousin is looking at this row house, she will know what every house on that street has sold for over the past 20 years. Well, that helps her tremendously in being able to purchase a property and know the value that the house should be worth in today's market. That practice, unfortunately, is not done throughout the world. In fact, that's a practice that is only partly done in parts of Asia, in Southeast Asia. And I will talk about that in more detail. But data recording the selling price is critical to being able to, for you, to be able to help your client establish a reasonable value for their property, whether your client's a buyer or a seller. And so, the bank financing, banks in England give loans on homes all the time. It's a very common practice in England and throughout Europe. And I know I keep saying England, and I'm really talking about the European business model because it's pretty consistent. I just came back from England visiting my cousin, and she was all excited about a property that she bought, and that's why I keep thinking England. Licensing. Standards are set by each government. So England sets theirs, France, and Belgium, and so forth. It's across the board. Every country sets their own. There are multiple real estate associations in every country. They generally have more than one in a country. Oftentimes there's not one predominant real estate association in each country, but it's pretty standard that you will see most every real estate professional a member of some real estate association. Why? Well, we'll talk more about that later this afternoon. But the value of being a part of an association is well perceived, certainly in the European experience, because this is where they get all their information. This is where they understand the market better. This is where they get together and decide what things they should be watching in the government regulations and legislation, and how they might talk to their elected officials in how this is impacting the industry as well as the consumer in these markets. Code of ethics. Again, every European country association has a code of ethics in place. No question, and they adhere to it. So what are the weaknesses in this model? Well, there's no buyer representations. Buyers are at a total disadvantage in the marketplace. They just don't have the backup to help them make a smart decision. Limited inventory. It was really interesting when we were in Denmark. All the agents there, the only homes they could sell were their own listings. And so I said, well, how many listings do you have? Because this is a really small market. He said, well, we might have over a year period of time, 20 listings. And I'm thinking, well, their income potential is limited, therefore, only to their listing inventory. So there's a great emphasis on getting out and listing properties, obviously. But you can never list enough variety of houses to meet every buyer's need. So it is it limits the real estate professional in their, certainly in their revenue and their ability to serve the broad public in purchasing properties. So, and the weakness is, like every other country, everyone has a different standard in licensing. That is, I don't think that's going to change. We're all independent countries. We all are going to do what we think is best for our own country. I get that. But when you cross over into another country, it is difficult to understand their requirements, and especially in the day and age that we're in, where global real estate investment is very common, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, I'm not going to pretend that I am the absolute expert in your market, but of course I've studied your market. That the National Association of Realtors has studied your market. We're very well aware of how you all are doing, and you're doing extraordinarily well as your economy grows and increases, and more people are able to buy property. But I need you to do me a favor right now, if you would, okay? Everybody who can raise their right hand, raise their right hand now. Okay, good. Good to go. Now, everybody who can raise their left hand, raise their left hand now. Okay, good. Now, why am I asking you to do that? Because this is class participation. You are involved in this conversation. You're the experts in your market. I need to hear from you. Now, I know, as I said, some about your market, but let's talk about agency. Do you practice buyer representation, seller representation, and dual representation? If you do, raise your right hand. Okay? Not many people do. Do you practice buyer representation? Raise your hand. Okay, we've got a few. How about seller representation? Raise your hand. Okay. A lot of seller representation here in the market. Do you practice dual representation in the market? You can represent both a buyer and a seller. Raise your hand. Yeah. So, okay. So what that tells me is that you do practice buyer representation. You practice seller representation. And you practice dual representation. Good. Property listings. How do you expose your properties to the market? Now, I know about some of this, but how many of you use the transaction form to expose your listings in your market? Anybody? Am I talking about the right thing when I say transaction form? Somebody help me out here. We have a mic. Okay? If you're not using the transaction form, then how many people are using the internet to expose your listings? In fact, very specifically, the company that's representing us here today. Look at this. Great. So, let me ask you something. When you put a listing up on site, who checks the information on that listing? And can that site also receive for sale by owners or people that aren't represented in the market? Do we know? Do you check your listing to make sure it's accurate? I'm assuming you do, right? How many people check your listings and make sure you're accurate in the market? Raise your right hand. So you're not very accurate. No one's raising their hand. Come on now. You got it. You're professionals. Okay. So you check your listings and make sure that you are putting out accurate information. Good for you. That's great. Do you pay other agents to sell your listings? Do you practice agent compensation? Do you share your commission with another agent? Raise your right hand. People do. Okay? And I'm not asking how much, just do you do that in the marketplace? Good, great. Licensing. Well, I think this morning we heard about the requirements of licensing and how important that is that people who are in this industry are properly licensed by the government. Associations. That's it. Yeah, well, financing. Financing. How many, let me ask you this. Now, are you with me? Listen to me. So, on the properties that you sell, how many people get a bank loan? How many people, would you say, half of the listings you sell, people finance through the bank? Raise your hand. Half. No? Okay. Oh, yes. About half of the people finance. Okay. How many people do you sell, would you say, the other half are financed through family? No. The family finances the house. How many people would say half of your listings are financed by the family? Raise your hand. We've got more hands here. Yeah, across the board. Okay, so in both cases, what you need to have and what you need to begin to establish is a database of value so that you can help the bank in securing loans and even the families that are securing a loan for their family member when they buy a home. I was in Taiwan. In Taiwan, a couple of years ago, Taiwan just passed legislation that you have to record your selling price. You cannot reduce it in any way whatsoever. See, people tend to want to reduce their price because there is what I would call a transfer tax on the property based upon the selling price. So they report a lower figure. And that can be very damaging to your ability to evaluate a property. So just keep that in mind. And then an association. We know the number one association here in Vietnam, and that's bars. There's no question about that. And I can tell you have a great code of ethics. Now let me ask you this. How many people have read your code of ethics? Raise your hand. How many people? No one here in the room has read the code of ethics. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, we're going to have fun this morning. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to confess something. You know, if I ask that same question in the United States, guess what? Their answer is probably going to be the same. So don't feel bad about that at all. So let's go to the next module, if we could. The next group. Okay. So this is one of the more exciting, I think, segments of our talks today. And that is trends that are affecting the marketplace. So we are living in, and this is true of all of us, everyone in Vietnam, everyone in Europe, in Asia, in Australia, in the US, in Canada, South America, it doesn't matter. We are living in today a consumer-centric age, meaning that the consumer is driving how we practice our business. That's not always been the case. In fact, you can see the consumer age really started in about 2000. Originally in real estate and in our industry, we were in a broker-dominated industry. The broker, the owner of the company, decided right up front how you would be paid, what you would charge